anybody that's listening that wants to get into the animal business, don't cut corners. That's not worth it. On animals' life, it's a life, and we care about them very seriously. So I would say the perception of the guest is everything. Of course, some people are going to say, well, they shouldn't be in an enclosure at all. And we understand that. The element that we kind of say is, well, we want to educate our guests about, these animals, because that's how we learn about them. So we know how to take, who they are and what they do, but it's been something that we take very seriously.
Welcome to the AttractionPros Podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the AttractionPros Podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Quick question for you.
Yeah.
You're a business owner. You run your business. Has there ever been any event over the course of Performance Optimist Consulting's, I think, 10 years now? Been in
10
business?
years. Yeah.
Oh, man. Wow. That's just cool. We'll talk about that in a second. But anything ever happened there that totally 10x'd your business?
No. I can equivocally, I can confidently say no, because I think if there was anything that 10x'd my business, I would be more than a solopreneur. It wouldn't just be me anymore. There's no way that I could handle 10 times the business without increasing my staff.
Right, because it would put a large strain on your resources as a solopreneur.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's a very good problem to have if it were to happen.
It would be a lovely problem to have, and I would welcome it. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to help me do that, I'm all ears.
Well, the reason why I ask is because our guest today, Reid, the general manager at Wild Florida, throughout some very creative marketing initiatives that they did near the beginning of the pandemic, Wild Florida more than 10x'd their daily attendance for a long period of time. And even while it's kind of tapered back a little bit, they're still seeing spikes on certain peak days like Saturdays, and they're seeing continued growth even over 2020, which was a phenomenal year. So we have a pretty cool interview coming up.
Yeah, I don't know how many other people could say that even within a year that they 10x their business, right? You just mentioned that I've been in business for 10 years. I'd have to go back and look. Have I 10x'd my business from year one to now? I'm not sure. Probably, maybe in that time. But, to hear about the changes that they had to make, dare I say, the pivots that they had to make, all the even thought processes that had to change. But I think what's most fascinating to me is this wasn't just made from like internal decisions, but it was how they listened to their guests as well that helped inform them of what those changes should be and how they could continue creating a great experience for their guests while also knowing that there's more and more and more coming.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that we've talked about on occasion is the importance of that guest feedback to find out what are some ways that you can improve and continue to optimize your operation, especially if you are in a completely new environment that you are not used to dealing with this many people, with this many logistics and backing up the road that leads to your attraction. A lot of new and exciting challenges that they've had to tackle.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that we've probably talked about before with some other attractions is sometimes we're looking so far out for our guests. Like, for example, Jared said that pre-pandemic, I think it was 60% of their guests were coming from overseas. They were international travelers, international tourists. And with the pandemic, those folks were not coming. So they had to look closer, and they have this cache of people that maybe they hadn't even marketed to because they're like, well, they're locals, would they really want to come here? Are they doing other things? Maybe they didn't put a lot of stress on that, but Now they kind of had to, and it has blown up their business in the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be one of the big things that we talk about is that 10X in your business, and specifically listening to your guests, and those two going hand in hand. But we also get to learn a lot just about what it's like to working with Florida wildlife and the gators, and there's just, amazing birds and not also the nature too, just the trees, the swamps. I mean, just all of it that wild Florida sits on. A little bit disconnected from the hustle and bustle, and definitely disconnected from kind of what can be perceived as the hectic world of Orlando, which they're very close to overall.
Yeah. No, so actually I have a quick question for you. You've lived in Florida.
Yes.
Have you ever taken an airboat ride?
Yes.
And what'd you think?
Loved it. I think it's fun. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at how fast they can go.
Oh yeah, me too. I'm surprised they can go over land, a lot of them.
Yeah, I have well, I don't even know when I'm on them. I don't know if I'm on land or not, because when you're on the swamp, like there can be like all the lily pads. And I'm like, as long as the driver knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the fun things that Jared talks about, I don't want to give too much of it away, but he talks about when you go out in the water and you turn off the airboat and there's this calm and this quiet. And the couple of airboat rides that I've taken, that seems to be like the most calm and quiet I've almost ever experienced in my life. Maybe it's because you were just listening to this roaring, 100 decibel motor, and then that turns off and it's the immediate cut of the sound, but it's just so tranquil. So I think that's something that a lot of people could use at this time, is a little tranquility.
I 100% agree. Even as you're casually watching an alligator swim by, which is, is part of the fun of going on an airboat ride, is counting how many gators you see and just seeing them just living their life. You're in their house, right? So just observe and keep going. So for now, I would say let's get to this wild interview with Jared Reid from Wild Florida.
Jared Reid from Wild Florida, thank you so much for joining us today on the Attraction Pros podcast. How are you doing today, Jared?
I'm doing great. So happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So excited to talk to you for the next couple of minutes. So Jared, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Wild Florida?
Yeah, no, I've been here at Wild Florida for about 7 years. I'm the general manager, and that basically encompasses overseeing everything here at the park, from the airboats to the safari to our walkthrough park to our restaurant, and really have enjoyed it. I love it. I love the outdoors. Not originally from here in Florida, so this is something that is completely new to me, and so excited to be a part of Wild Florida. It's an amazing company. So wonderful to see our guests come every day and be educated and experience what we call Wild Florida. So I'm happy to be here.
Can you give us kind of a quick overview of sort of the landscape of Wild Florida? You're based, I think, in Kissimmee specifically, which is really close to Orlando, but it's also a little off the beaten path to, or what is it? Is it Kenansville? Is that the name of it?
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Which is not too far from kind of the major Central Florida attractions. But where does Wild Florida fit into that whole mix and the landscape of all the attractions in the Orlando area?
No, we are about 45 minutes south of Orlando in, like you said, Kenansville, the outskirts of Kenansville. And we market ourselves as the middle of nowhere. So we really kind of have to go out through a bunch of down the highway, but a bunch of farm areas and ranch area land to a beaten path. But we're roughly 200-300 acres here. And, we just have, like I said before, we have the airboats. And so it's unique because really not much in the Orlando area. There's not big lakes that people go on in the specific Orlando area where they can do airboat rides. Then obviously the acreage out here where we can do that safari. And so really, it's within that driving distance of the parks, we would say, where people come out and visit us all the time, because we're not too far, but we're still within that range of most people wanting to go outside of their vacation to Orlando.
Jared, a couple of seconds ago, when you were kind of describing Wild Florida, if for the people who are not watching, you did kind of air quotes when you said, we'll show them Wild Florida. And I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit, because I think a lot of people who are not from Florida, when they think of Florida and they think of the parks, they think of Universal or Disney and SeaWorld. And some people never get outside that bubble. So having lived in Florida, I know that there's a lot of wildlife, a lot of nature if you get beyond that kind of Orlando bubble. So can you describe a little bit more about what you mean by quote unquote wild Florida?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one thing that people don't really know or is that Orlando is considered the headwaters of the Florida Everglades. So, everybody knows the Everglades are kind of South Florida. So, Orlando has that Reedy Creek, Shingle Creek area where these creeks roll down into chains of lakes. And we're off of Lake Cypress, which is, again, about 45 minutes south of that, where you're complete swampland. So we've got the cypress trees, you got a lot of the cattail grass, you have, lily pads and just swamp area where it's pristine. We're one of the only airboat companies that has no development around. So when you do go out on our tours, you don't see anything about the wild. So when we say wild Florida, we're saying that you're going to experience what Florida was like thousands of years ago. And some of these creeks have been around for hundreds or thousands of years, and original trees in some places. So you're looking at that in addition to a lot of the wildlife that you might see in Florida, like the bald eagle, of course, the American alligator, wading birds, turtles, a few water snakes, raccoons, just a variety of wildlife. And so you really are getting into their habitat where they live and experiencing what they would experience.
Yeah. And what's really cool with that is that you're really able to share that with so many people who kind of have this preconceived notion that Florida was born when Mickey Mouse emerged 50 years ago. And being so close to Orlando, being able to kind of serve that demographic. Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to, I would say, tap into Central Florida's tourist market? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about how you've shifted that to locals during COVID, but has that kind of always made up the guest demographic as far as people who are in town and then are able to now go a little bit south of the main area to get to you?
Yeah, no, we will give all praise and glory to Disney and Universal, these big parks that really do attract people to come to the Orlando area. We hoped in the future to be one of those attractions where people are coming to Orlando to see wild Florida. We have repeat customers that feel that way about us, but still have a lot, millions of more people that we want to have come down to visit us. But yeah, we just basically, the kind of a way that we would market ourselves is away from the hustle and bustle. So people, have done the parks or kind of the, more of the metropolitan areas that they want to come out, and really it's slow, calm, no lines, just walk at your own pace, really enjoy just the outdoors. And there's no lines or anything. Everything here, if you have a reservation for our airboat, you have a reservation. So you get on when you come. Our safari, you can go through as many times you want in the day. There's really no lines. Our walk-through park is walk at your own pace. Different variety of shows that are shown multiple times throughout the day. So we really are trying to market ourselves as the day away from the hustle and bustle. That's kind of one of the things that we've really presented or marketed ourselves as.
And it really feels like, you're going for those people who might want to get away from the hustle and bustle, but also kind of get in touch with nature a little bit, right? It's so easy to be disconnected from, like you said, the cypress trees and the lake and the lily pads and the wildlife. It can be so easy to get disconnected from that in our lives, but it can also be very rejuvenating to be in that environment. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that does for your guests?
No, absolutely. One of my favorite things, on occasion I get to drive the airboats, and we have our captains, but every so often I get to take a boat ride out, and we have a spot on our lake that we go out and we pull up, you kind of turn off the engine and just listen. And it's just so peaceful and so calming. And we just say, this is Florida. I think you're absolutely right by saying that people associate Florida with Disney, Universal, maybe some golf, some beaches, but there's a lot of calmness just within the state itself, especially out here. And so, yes, I think people don't necessarily even know that. They don't even know that. So when we come out, we say, look, you're calm. It's quiet. It's fresh air. No like pollution or anything. And I think they begin to understand and be like, wow, this is really amazing. I didn't even know this about Florida. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about my job what we do here is we're educating people. not only on the wildlife, but just on Florida and what it's had to offer for years and years.
How has that specifically played a role in the way that you maybe communicate these offerings to your guests over the last year and a half? And so as you're talking about this and the calm, the tranquility, personally for me, several weeks ago, or a little over a month ago or so, my wife and I, we got COVID, and our baby, we, like, all three of us, we had it, and we were just at home. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. And while we were sitting at home, we booked a trip several weeks out to a state park. Because I said to my wife, I said, I just want to go look at nature. I said, I just want to go look at trees. We live in the city anyway, so, you know, we're a little somewhat disconnected from that. But for whatever reason, the gears turning in my mind said, I need to go just breathe fresh air kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So how has that played a role in everything that we've been going through since March?
No, that's a great question. It's really been the answer for everyone. I mean, everybody has said that, especially during this COVID time when we were lucky enough to be one of the only parks, or if not the only park open. We had hundreds and thousands of people coming here, but even now we still get this. It's just, I just want to go out and just breathe fresh air and just relax and not be around people, because there's still several people and visitors that are very COVID sensitive, which we are, take that very seriously. But there's open spaces. If you go on an airboat ride, we've limited our capacity in our boats. So there's, you can go out there and not feel like you're rubbing shoulders with someone. In our safari, where you're in your own car, you can roll the windows down. You don't have to feel this, tightness around you. And I don't know, people just really, really enjoyed that. And we hear that constantly. That's one of, I think, the most rewarding compliments that we get here is that they love it here because they just have space and it's just not hectic. And so to answer some more of your question, I mean, most people have really never even thought about that. And so when they come here, they're like, this is what I want to do from now on. I mean, I've always wanted to do the Disney or the Universal, these other places, but now they're like, I want to go and just breathe fresh air and be out in nature and see what Florida has to offer. And it's maybe attracted them into kind of what you said, maybe other vacations. Let's go see a state park somewhere else because of nature is beautiful. And so it's helped a lot with that because people still want that space. They don't want to be around a lot of people. And all the time, I mean, daily we get that. I didn't think this place would be as amazing as it is. It's so beautiful. Wow, this is a lot more open air than I expected. It's a very rewarding compliment that we hear.
So Jared, for keen Attraction Pros listeners, they may recognize your voice because this is actually the second time you've been on our podcast. You were the first contributor when we did the Attraction Pros Live from the Florida Attractions Association conference. And you had a great story about how Wild Florida really pivoted during COVID. And in some ways you said that was almost the best thing that ever happened to you. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I want to preface it with saying we were extremely blessed and lucky to be able to have our attraction open. And I know there's many attractions out there still struggling. And so I say my words lightly when I say that we were very blessed and like being bold, it was the best thing that's ever happened to us. Outside of the fact that we were the only place open, I mean, of course, that's a huge benefit. We were able to tap into the Florida resident market that we just really had done very little marketing, if any. We've primarily been an international attraction for a lot of these tourists from the UK and Europe and South America. And so now we had, a couple million people in this area, this city that are now looking for something to do. And so we really hit the pavement hard with promotions and blogs and billboards about not having to wear a mask. I know it was still in that time where masks were mandatory, but in your own car, you didn't have to wear a mask. And so people were like, wow, I don't have to do that. It was all hands-free. They didn't have to even roll the window down and give us a ticket. They could just show us on their phone. And so it was amazing because all those people now that we would have worked years and years to get now have come out here, and we keep track every day of local tourists or United States domestic, also local Florida resident versus international. And still to this day, a year and a half later, we're looking at still having more Florida residents visit our attraction every day than any other demographic or category. And so it's just amazing to be able to open our minds, broaden our horizon for that marketing effort that we we maybe planned on maybe getting some of that, a few years down the road. And now here we are where it's just bombarding us, and it's been amazing. And pivoting was, was a challenge because we kind of planned for, like I said in the podcast, 200 to 300 people a day, where on some weekends we're getting 3,000 or 4,000. And we didn't have an infrastructure for that. But we pivoted, we figured things out, we expanded lanes, we made the safari a little bit bigger, we expanded our safari. So it was amazing. It was a very stressful, amazing thing, but very lucky and blessed to be able to have been open when so many others were struggling.
Did you ever wonder if that would work? Because you've focused so much on tourist business. Were there questions of like, will Florida residents want to come see this when they have maybe easier access to the swamps and lakes and, and airboats and things like that? Why would they want to come visit us? What were those conversations like early on?
Yeah, no, I think initially it was more like we thought, well, we're the only place open. So we kind of even like downgraded ourselves of, oh yeah, we are an amazing attraction, but people are just looking for something to do. But then we just started hearing such good feedback and saying, people really like this. And why don't you, had so many suggestions about this or that. And we really grew because of the suggestions of our visitors. We might need more animals here, or we need this, we need to sell this here, or let's do this. And so no, I don't think that we thought that this would happen. Not nearly this fast, but it was just amazing. It was amazing that it did.
So Jared, can we peel back that onion a little bit, as Josh and I like to say? You said you went from having like 200 to 300 people to 3,000 to 4,000. So what was that like? Like, what did you have to change with your staff, with the layout, with everything? Like, I'm just curious kind of how that change happened.
Yeah, one of the most prevalent things we had to do is we had to hire a traffic cop. Didn't ever imagine to have to worry about traffic. We're on a public road, and you're off of a public road. And for over a year, every Saturday and sometimes Fridays, we would hire a traffic cop to come and direct traffic because it's a public road and people want to get to the public lake. So it was a little bit of a struggle with that aspect because a lot of the locals didn't necessarily want to say, good for you, Wild Florida. Is like, well, you're inconveniencing us. So bless the people of St. Cloud and Kenansville. They've come to love us now, but it was a struggle initially. We did a lot of pre-check-in. We had people walking up and down the lines with cell phones or tablets, checking guests in instead of having to go to the kiosk where they would normally check in. So we had to, we started out with 2 people in the kiosk. Now, even to this day, we're still running 5 to 6 and Saturdays 7. And so we had more staffing. When we were feeding our giraffes, we had a little bit of a line. Well, now, some people were waiting for so long, we had to cover it, put fans and misters in. We had to really start ordering bulk lettuce because, a little bit here and now on Saturday, you go through 10 or 15 cases of lettuce. Feeding the animals, we started out with animals, but as we got more and more people, they're like, we need more and more. And so we were getting more animals. So our food budget had to be increased. We had to have more roamers. We have 4 people in our drive-thru safari, specifically roaming, making sure that guests are staying in their vehicles, abiding by the rules, not getting out of their cars and touching the animals. So we had to do that. We actually built a safari barn to maintain all of our side-by-side buggies and the feed. So the list kind of was endless with that. But biggest thing was the staffing. And luckily we had so many people who were furloughed or had been let go, so we had a plethora of people to choose from. And so yeah, we had to pivot in so many ways because during that 2-3 months, all the rest of our park was closed. So we also used some of our own staff, but to come on and help out the safari. But really, it was amazing. I mean, it was awesome that our team came together and did that. I was very, very proud of our team.
Yeah. So what I'm curious is to kind of take this and align it with kind of the conversation we were having just before this. When your attendance 10Xs or more than 10Xs in such a short period of time, how do you balance that with the fact that you're promising them that this isn't going to be hectic, that they're coming to this really nice, relaxing, tranquil environment and connecting with nature? What was that challenge like for you?
Oh, that was a huge challenge. I got to be completely honest. There was a little bit of that. well, quite frankly, for about the first month, a lot of that, where people did say that to us. And so we had to rethink the path, expanding the path so people could actually pull off the side of the path instead of having cars constantly, behind them kind of honking, saying, go forward. We started doing scheduled times where people could come during either the morning or the afternoon, so that people didn't always just, let's say we had 3,000 people, not all of them show up between 9 and 12. We had some shifts in the afternoon. We started doing pre-bookings, and once we hit a certain amount of people, we cut that because we knew people were still going to show up. So we might get an extra 300 walk-ins when we were primarily wanting to be reservation based, and during this pandemic time. So that helped cut that back. I mean, we had to kind of cut down on the business that we were receiving, but we cared so much about our customer experience that we were willing to sacrifice revenue because of that question you asked, that we don't want our guests to say, well, this was a waste of my time coming here because I felt so rushed. And so it took us about a month to work that out, and luckily we did, because it worked itself out. And still to this day, I mean, since we've expanded our safari another 2 miles of road, we feel like that is completely out the window now. We feel like we can do about 500 cars in 4 miles worth of road, and that's never going to happen at one period of time. So we thought about that when we were expanding the safari, of making sure that there isn't going to be a traffic issue inside and that people aren't being pushed. So it was a hard thing to cope with, but we really quickly learned how to fix that, and luckily we did, because those complaints or suggestions kind of went away.
Jared, a minute ago, you were talking about listening to your guests, and certainly you were just talking about that, with the answer to Josh's question. But I'm curious, even during that process, were there things that surprised you that your guests were saying, or things that you're like, where is this coming from? I'm just curious if there was things that were kind of out of the blue or things you weren't expecting.
Yeah, I think one of the surprising things was we felt like we got a variety of animals, and we had initially had 85 to 100 acres for our first plot of area for the safari, and we spent a lot of money and got a lot of animals. And so a constant suggestion was, we need more. We thought, well, we don't want to pack so many animals in there to where they feel like they are in enclosures or cages per se. And so we realized, well, people want to see more, and we did some studies and figured some things out that we felt like if we got more animals, it isn't making them look like they're in an enclosure and they don't have the space. That's one of the things our guests do love about our safari, is that currently at the time there was 2 paddocks, about 50 acres each. I mean, that's plenty of land, no animals, they can do whatever they want. We have shelters, they can go inside and eat. And so that was one thing that surprised us, because we thought we had plenty of animals. And luckily we had made some good contacts where we get some animals pretty quickly. It's not an easy thing now because of that unfortunate freeze that happened in Texas and the Midwest. That's where a lot of animals and livestock come from currently. And so that was interesting. I think the hands-free aspect of it, even we masked and gloved and everything. I think I took it very seriously, but I think that was something that our guests were very, very serious about. And so that whole mobile app portion of it, or, touch-free, we just had to work some details out there, because there's certain things we need to see, but we had to figure out, well, how can we see that and they feel comfortable without them having to give us something. So that was a little surprising. And I just think the idea of the traffic and the lines, having to have we actually had put an order in to have a little wait time clock where people coming down the road can see, 30 minutes till you can get in the safari. And so just having to communicate more. We had people walking up and down the lines telling people how long the line was going to be and how long they have to wait. Never thought we'd have to do that, but that helped a lot. Like, oh, I'm 20 minutes away. Okay, I can do this. If it's an hour or 2 hours, no, I'm not going to do that. So 3 things off the top of my head that I can think of that were very surprising that I didn't expect.
Sure.
Oh, that's really interesting. Jared, another thing that you mentioned a few minutes ago was that you had to amp up the hiring, obviously, because of the increase in demand. And that at the time that you were doing that, there were still many people throughout the industry and throughout the region that were either laid off or furloughed, and that you kind of came in really with an advantage to be able to attract a lot of talent. But then not too long after that is kind of when there was a little bit of a talent shortage. Can you talk or kind of walk us through maybe like the ebbs and flows of how that has gone from being able to recruit quality talent, since you reopened and since all this happened?
Yeah, no, we were really lucky to be able to, a lot of those furlough, I mean, and still several Disney employees and things had come down and worked for us for that extended period of time until their furlough ended and they went back. And so we were able to get really good, high quality, specifically animal, because again, we were the only portion that was open, at least for a couple of months, was that animal portion. So we were able to tap into that. And what we knew that once that furlough ended and that we were up front and they were up front with us, they wanted to go back to the Disney or the SeaWorld or Universal. But what it did do was a little surprising is that, because it's specifically with the animal portion, is that people recognized these employees that we're a legitimate attraction. We have really beautiful animals and we take really good care of them. While Florida wasn't necessarily a big name prior to the pandemic, and what is that like? It's in the middle of nowhere. I wonder if they really do take care of their animals or take care of their, so that was nice to have. So then they could go out and say, hey, if you're looking for a place to work, you want to work with some animals, really hands-on, a great experience, go check out Wild Florida. So when it comes to the hiring of the animals, we still to this day, we have like a wait list of people who are waiting to get hired here, because we have really good connections with several other zoos and parks around the state. But the other side of it, it still has been a challenge. It hasn't been as easy. So we of course use every avenue we can, the Indeeds, the Facebook, we do, word of mouth. We try and go and find people at these places that have really good customer service and say, come on out to Wild Florida, work for us, and come visit, come do a site visit of the place to work. It's something we never thought we'd have to do, but it's still been a challenge. And we are getting to the point where we're able to offer specific like career type jobs here, because we're expanding. But before the pandemic, we didn't necessarily have as many career path or career jobs. It was more of the front line, which, we know there's kind of high turnover with, the high school age or, college kids that are getting a job during that. Once they graduate, go on to whatever they graduated in their degree. But it still to this day has been a challenge. But as far as the animal part, very, very easy. If somebody leaves, we can find someone within days.
Not that you want them to leave.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, of course. Jared, we've been lucky enough to speak to some other folks that have animal collections. And I'm just curious from your perspective, aside from the animal keeper part, what are some of the unique challenges or even opportunities that you have when you have an animal collection that's part of your attraction?
Yeah, I think the concern of the guest is something that is right up there at the top. I'll publicly say this, we make all of our enclosures 2 to 3 times larger than required by code, because we want to kind of put those customers and those guests at ease, thinking that these animals that are in enclosures are have a bigger area to survive and live in. We do a lot of interactions with our animals so that we can take them out of the enclosure, walk them around. So that is something that we definitely do. Taking care of, their diets and making sure they get fed well. That's another thing that we get heavily, we get like FWC and USDA come down and inspect us and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do with the diets. Upkeep on the enclosures themselves. We don't have an on-site vet either, but we have a gentleman from in town that comes out once a week and checks on the animals. If there is an issue, we've trained kind of ourselves to do some veterinary work here, mild veterinary work. But I don't know, it's just the public view of animals and their safety and their care is something that we've taken very seriously, obviously. And we know that the one thing that we can say is that we know that the animals are what bring people here. So, if we want people to come see, we need to take care of the product that we have. And we're very lucky to have real amazing collection of animals here, from what we say alligators to zebras. We say A to Z, and continually acquiring animals even to this day.
Yeah. You mentioned that one of the reasons why your enclosures are 2 to 3 times larger, I think substantially larger than to code, is because of the guest perception of them. So how important is that guest perception element compared to actually meeting the standard or meeting the code, knowing that kind of the perception can be the reality if the guest doesn't feel that it's
that's all the importance, honestly. I mean, if you want to get into anybody that's listening that wants to get into the animal business, don't cut corners. That's not worth it. The animal's life, it's a life, and we care about them very seriously. So I would say the perception of the guest is everything. Of course, some people are going to say, well, they shouldn't be in an enclosure at all. And we understand that. The element that we kind of say is, well, we want to educate our guests about, these animals, because that's how we learn about them. So we know how to take, who they are and what they do, but it's been something that we take very seriously. So any suggestion, animal health, because even in our safari, almost a couple of times a day, we'll get calls and say, hey, we're out here in the safari from a guest. And they'll say, we see an animal, it's limping a little bit. Radio, our team goes over there and helps let's take that animal off and see what we can do. We do morning checks every single morning on our animals here in the park and out in the safari. But, something could happen during the day that we don't necessarily see because we have, hundreds of acres. So that's the most important thing. Of course, you have to have a budget, and that's difficult. Sometimes we have to make difficult choices when it comes to an animal. But if you have a plan in place, like an end of life plan, or you want to give them high quality food, budget for those types of things. Just know that going in, that you should not skimp when it comes to the care of an animal, because the guests will notice that very quickly.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was a really great question about perception, because you talked about those enclosures being 2 to 3 times bigger than code, but the guests don't know what the code is, right?
You're right.
They don't know. So it is all their perception to see that, hey, this animal has an enclosure that looks like it's big enough, so that they're not cramped and that they're comfortable and things like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, thinking about, you've got the drive-through safari, which is kind of like just wild animals being wild, right?
Yep.
And then you've got the walkthrough portion where you have animals that are more in enclosures that people can kind of get a little closer to. So is there a different dynamic there, just from a guest experience standpoint, where you look at them kind of differently because one is walkthrough and one is drive-through?
Yes, I can tell you, to this day, we have not had one necessarily complaint or comment about the safari animals when they're with their enclosures, not one. And we have hundreds of animals out there. So yes, when it comes to the walkthrough park, we might get a comment or two a day about, an enclosure, or the animal looks really tired, or why is it doing this? And I think it's because they're obviously within the walls of an enclosure, but they can get more up close. Sometimes they might see in our safari a zebra that's 100 feet away, but they can come into our park and see a bird that's 3 feet away from their face. So there's a completely different dynamic there. That's hardly, if it ever have had an issue with a complaint with the enclosure, the safari, because it's open. Mm-hmm. And it's been great to be able to kind of not have that issue come up, because it is, and I like that.
Yeah. So you've got the drive-through safari, you've got the walkthrough and the encounters and the animal shows, and you've got the airboat tours. What's next? Kind of where does it go from here? What do you think the offerings have opportunity to expand in?
Yeah, no, I think one thing we've discussed a few times, and so I don't want to say this is going to happen, but is like a zip line. And maybe doing a 5 or 6 zip line through the safari, over the giraffe area, or over the crocodile pond, or the gator pond. So there's that. In addition, when we did the second expansion of our safari, the owners here did acquire another parcel of land that could even do another expansion of the safari if we wanted to do that. So that's an area. And just one of the things that one of the questions I was asked was, what can you see the most growth in, initially? And I think it's more of our animal encounters. We offer 4 or 5 different animal encounters, but every animal we want to be able to educate our guests with, so we can do more encounters. It takes a long time to get an animal ready to meet with people. They just don't want people around them. You have to train them to do that. But one animal that we are going to be acquiring in 2022 that I received permission from the owners to say was that we are going to be getting rhinos. And so we're having, hopefully by the end of this year, we're going to have built their enclosure area to where we'll do like rhino encounters, going inside with them, but outside, and, being able to feed or pet them. We just, the owners really want interactive education to happen. And so that's an area where I see the most expansion going on. Our airboats, the only unfortunate part about airboats is there's a capacity. You can only do a certain amount of people in a day. Our boats only can hold 17 people. So the safari, that's why the safari has been so amazing, is that there really is no cap there. We can do more, meet and greets out in the safari, or we can expand it and do something else. So that's where I would say the growth that I see happening is in those two specific areas.
Jared, you talked about the animals not necessarily wanting to be around people. I think there's some people that don't want to be around other people too. They have to be trained on what that's all about. I want to switch gears just for a little bit, because you were just talking about the airboats, and I've had the pleasure of going on some airboat rides when I lived in Florida, and looking at your website too. You've got an emblem down at the bottom where it talks about the Coast Guard, and I know that there's a lot of laws and licensings that goes into being able to operate an airboat. So can you kind of walk us through that, just kind of from the safety perspective, so people kind of understand what goes into becoming an airboat captain?
Absolutely. So that we take pride in that. That's and that is a selling point to a lot of these guests that come specifically with corporate groups. They want to know that their guests are going to be safe. And so to get a captain's license, you have to have, I think it's about 720 days on a boat with a motor. It doesn't mean you have to have 720 days of airboat experience. And so, myself growing up, we had a sailboat and a boat. And so I was able to acquire, I think you can acquire hours from when you're 16. And so, of course, I spent days and days on those boats and with my family. And so you have to first off acquire the hours, and then you have to do it was 14 days straight of classroom time. So we did it from like 6 to 10 p.m. during the week, and then 8 hours a day on each of the Saturdays, Sundays for those 2 weekends. You're learning the rules of the road, because this license isn't an airboat captain's license. It's a 25 gross ton captain's license. So I could go and captain a vessel out on the ocean. Not that I want to do that, but so you need to learn the rules of the road out on the ocean in navigable waters and waterways. You need to learn, lights and symbols of boats. Obviously the directions. They actually had a full day course on charting. So in case your navigation system goes down, you learn how to chart with minutes and degrees and all that stuff. So you do that. And then every 5 years, you have to re-up that. So you have to acquire, I don't think it's 720. I think it's somewhere around the 400 days of experience. So you have to continue to do those, drive the boats. You just can't stop and then get your license. But we also get inspected. The other thing that is vitally important is we get inspected by the Coast Guard. So since they're Coast Guard kind of vessels per se, twice a year, we have to have the Coast Guard come out and inspect our vessels. Every 5 years, they do a whole inspection. So they pull the boat out of the water, they look and make sure it's all, safe. And then we have to do quarterly trainings with our captains on man overboard trainings. So, throw a dummy off the boat. How do you put your boat into the wind, or, if a fire's on the boat, where do you need to turn the fuel off? So pretty much anything safety that you can think of. CPR, we have to be CPR trained and first aid trained, and that's every 2 years. It's very serious stuff. And so because we are in navigable waters, we have to have that Coast Guard license. And, down in South Florida and some of these other areas where people can just be, you could be an airboat captain if you want, never having driven an airboat before. And, that works for some. It's a little uneasy for me to want to get on a boat with somebody I know who doesn't have a safety license or a Coast Guard license, or the boats don't have to be inspected. So that helps when we present that to our corporate people who want to come out. And also when guests come and get on the boat, in order for us to take off, we're required by the Coast Guard to go over safety training. So we tell them, if something happens to me, you go to this orange box. Here's the flares, whistles, maps. Here's a fire extinguisher. This is how you do this, this, and this. And make sure everybody understands. You kind of have to give a head nod from everyone to make sure they understand. And then we can start the experience.
Do you find that those types of, I guess, elements that go into those like safety instructions for guests just increases and boosts confidence in guests, knowing that they're somewhere, who absolutely sees safety as the number one priority?
Yes, absolutely. One of the comments that guests will make, because when I do get to drive the boats, we have a railing around our boat, and that's required by the Coast Guard. So, it's not open. So, you have to go through a little gate to get on the boat. And every single time you pull up to an alligator or something, people are like, well, is that alligator going to jump in the boat? Well, no. We got that railing. We're safe. I'm like, yes, you are. So yes, it definitely does. People notice that, and they do care about that. I think when we say we're required by the Coast Guard and I have a Coast Guard, issued license, a lot of times I go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Because not everyone reads that or sees that little symbol at the bottom of our webpage. And, it makes people feel confident. It actually makes me feel comfortable because I kind of know what I'm doing, at least know the rules of the road. Again, it's not for a airboat, but now having had years of experience, I feel more comfortable.
Jared, from a I guess guest experience standpoint, what are some of those other kind of frequent comments or frequent questions that you get maybe out on the airboat, or people maybe in the walkthrough safari that you're just like, duh, of course that's not good. You know what I mean? Because we all have those questions that we get from guests sometimes. So I'm curious what some of your favorites are.
I would say on the airboat ride, we get a lot of people that ask, because there's cows. Do alligators eat cows? A big cow, I'm like, no. I get it. They're animals out in the wild, but a huge bull is not nearly the same size as a 6-foot alligator. But that get a lot of questions about just the difference between an alligator and a crocodile, because I think the TV shows and everything kind of depict these animals as like born killers, and you don't want to swim in there and you don't want to do this because they're going to kill you. And really, alligators are extremely scared of humans. They're very solitary. They want to kind of be by themselves. Crocodile, on the other hand, that's the difference. They're born killers. So I think that's something that it's fun to educate people, because they're like, well, and you can see locals out here on the lake swimming in the water, and people are like, what? I would never swim. Well, I don't know if I would ever swim either, but alligators don't get around people. The only time there's ever alligator issues is when people are, actually disturbing the alligator, which they shouldn't be doing anyway. So that's probably something out here in the lake. But in the safari, I'm trying to think of what might be one that might be surprising. That's a good question. I might have to get back to you on that one.
Right. We'll have you back for part 3.
Yeah.
Everything you were just saying there about kind of the difference between alligators and crocodiles, and that alligators are naturally very afraid creatures, just reminds me of. So I went to school at Florida Gulf Coast University, did a couple of years there in Fort Myers, and it's at the time there had still been a lot of land yet to be developed. It was very marshy, I guess you could say. Probably a lot of it I think still is, but there's this beautiful lake. And you could like take out sailboats and and things there. And I remember there being a sign on the lake that said like alligators like may be present. They have a natural fear of humans, but feeding them can take away that fear. So I remember seeing that sign and just always stuck with me. And one morning I took out a sailboat and it got kind of caught in like a very swampy, marshy area. So the water I think was like a couple feet deep, and I'm standing there and it's so murky I can't even see in it. And because the water safety guy like came out to like help me with the sailboat, and I was like, there are no gators in this area, are there? And he's like, no, this is pretty much where they hang out actually. I was like, all right, cool, let's get this boat back up. Like, hopefully no one's feeding them, hopefully they're all swimming away. So but yeah, I mean, that is something that a lot of people just assume that alligators are vicious creatures because they have sharp teeth, they look scary, they look very intimidating. Same thing with sharks too. I'm sure we'll probably go down that route, but and that also then stresses the importance that you have to be able to help communicate that to people from an education standpoint. Yes. So Another question I have, and kind of along the lines of guest experience, but going back to what we were saying about the increased attendance, is if you see that being a sustained increase kind of as the pandemic starts to wane, and Florida, I know for the most part is a lot of it is back to, I guess, business as usual prior to, don't want to say 100%, but, kind of much more normal than maybe some of the rest of the country, rest of the world. Do you see that being continued, that you're going to be able to continue to engage Florida residents and gain repeat visitors from locals, or, immediately tap back into the tourist market and being able to kind of harness all the success that you've had in doing this throughout the pandemic and keep it going into the future?
Yeah, no, I think if I would have said that maybe in like January of this year, I probably would have said we really didn't know where to go, because we thought that Florida market would kind of die off, and we expected the international market to come back, and still hasn't back. But like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, every day we're still seeing more Florida residents. I know the international tourism isn't here, but then just, domestic travelers. And that's been really awesome to see, even, in these slow periods of time. So yes, I mean, those two or 3 months when we were the only ones open, those are crazy numbers. We have not hit those numbers, but maybe a handful of times since then, except on the Saturdays. But we've seen, and we're on track this year to do a 20% increase in our guest attendance than 2020, which 2020 was the best year we've ever could have even dreamed of. And the exciting part is that we still have no international tourists here. So we feel like really the sky's the limit. I mean, prior to the pandemic, roughly 60% of our business was international tourism, in addition to corporate travelers. Well, we haven't had hardly any, if any, corporate groups, and we don't have any international tourism. I mean, and so we're projecting another, hopefully a huge period of growth in 2022. That so it should build, and it's just the expectation is, we feel like we still have a lot of room to grow, and the Florida market, although die down a tad because all those people have now these other attractions, thankfully, to go to for those other businesses, they're still leading the way coming here. So that's been really awesome to see, and that's why we track that. We didn't necessarily track that before the pandemic ever. It was just kind of like a big group of numbers, but now we want to know so we can know if we're doing well, and if we need to market to these specific zip codes or these areas, do certain things to attract more locals here. Yeah.
Well, Jared, this has been a fascinating interview, and I certainly appreciate your time. It makes me want to go out and spend some time in nature, maybe take an airboat ride, although I don't think there's many of those here in North Carolina, but I'll come down and visit you at Wild Florida. If somebody wanted to know more about Wild Florida, or even get in touch with you specifically, where would you send them?
Yeah, so first off, go to our website. It's www.wildfl, like Florida, fl.com. Take a look at all the offerings we have. We have a variety of different things outside of just, the airboat, the safari, the park. We've got animal encounters. We have a restaurant. We do different things, corporate events, different avenues that way. Or you can call us at 407-957-3135. That's to get to our reservation number. I'm more than happy to field any emails, talk to anybody that has some questions. My email is Jared, Jared, @wildfl.com. We feel like I know we're an amazing attraction. I don't feel like that. And we hear that every day from our customers. We really pride ourselves on having amazing customer service and really letting people experience what Wild Florida is like. And that's one of the questions you'd asked earlier was what my favorite thing about my job, or I just love being able to come here and see people happy and experience something that I myself have never experienced until moving here to Florida. I'm not from here. Florida is a beautiful state, beautiful animals, beautiful nature, just everything's amazing about the state. And so love to have everybody come out and take a tour with us, and you can reach out to me and we can try and figure something out.
Awesome. Jared, like Matt said, this is just such a great conversation. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. So thank you so much for your time today. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all Attraction Pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros Podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.